Hi and welcome to Sparkle Chart.
Hello fans of Lulu art. It's Kate here today and I have a quick and simple project for you. Now my last two projects for Lulu art have been mega marathons, and thank you for sticking with me through those beautiful art journal pages that I hope you enjoyed. This one is going to be something very relaxing, very calm, very simple, but also quite pretty. So I'm going to be using a Holbein masking pen. Now you could also use some masking tape or artist's tape if you have it. You're going to need a watercolor paper pad, stencil, and some of the beautiful watercolors from Gansai Tambi. Now this is the large set, and of course I won't be using all of the colors, but it's so nice to have some options. Now the first thing you're going to need to do is mask off your paper. Now this is watercolor paper. Now I'm not going to take this out of the block because that'll help keep it flat when I add things to it, but I am going to tape the edges off. Now you can be as precise or as imprecise as you like here. For me, I just need a straight edge, so I'm just going to make sure my masking tape or artist's tape or even washi tape in a pinch is making good contact with the surface. Now take your Holbein masking ink and I'm going to draw what's supposed to look like some watercolor drifts. Sorry, some snowdrifts, watercolor drifts. Yeah, that's a good one, Kate. Okay, so I have some very gentle snowdrifts. Might just draw one more. And this will form the basis of my card. Now the masking ink is fantastic because you know that it's dry when it's gone nice and pink. So mine's now gone pink and it's nice and rubbery, ready to use. In preparation, I've added some water to my watercolor trays and I've added a little bit of water to my palette over here. And I'm using one of the paint and draw palettes. It just means that it has a little lid that you can pop on in case you've got any leftovers for later. So I'm going to start by just getting a little bit of colour and mixing it with some water because I'd like the snowdrifts to be really, really light. And so I'm even mixing it with a bit more water on the side here. And I'm just going to add this very light colour into the snowdrifts and then blend it out to the edge there. And I'm just going to do that for all of them. Now you'll notice I'm getting a bit of just water on the brush and dragging that line up to the masking fluid, and that's just so I don't get any watermarks. Okay, now that I've got that initial bit of colour on there, I'm going to go back in with that same colour and just add it to the corners. And if at any time it gets too dark, I'm just going to add a little bit more water because I want really soft edges here. Alright, so I'm just going to add a tiny bit of purple to the mix. This is going to be fairly delicate because the purple's quite dark. So I'm just going to need to mix up my own little sort of magic concoction to get the depth or not of colour that I want. So I'm just going to start very lightly. If it's still too light, I'll add a bit more of the purple to the water mixture and just the tiniest bit of darker blue. Now that that's in, I'm going to go back with that original blue colour and just kind of drop a little bit of that in the corners. And I'm just soaking up a little bit of that water with the brush, just so that the edges aren't too sort of puddly. And that should do nicely for my snowdrifts. Now I just need to twist this around a bit and add a little bit more water to my palette so I can move on to some slightly darker colours. Now it's time to have a go at the night sky, and I'd like to do something quite dark for this. So I'm going to start with some beautiful pale green and just add this at the bottom down here as a nice fresh base. Now I'm just going to grab some water and paint up the page just to avoid any watermarks. Then add another little layer of the beautiful green down here. Nice and strong because it's going to need to compete with some other pretty strong colours in a second. Alright, so there's this awesome dark greeny blue, and I'm going to add that next. Specifically this one's number 57. And I'm just adding it so it sort of seeps into the green at the bottom and works its way towards the top. Then I'm going to add some of the blue that I'd put in the bottom here, but in a much more strong consistency. And this is 66. I'm just going to do the same thing here. And then a nice strong colour at the top, so I'm going for 67. Which is kind of an inky blue. I'm just going to tap this around the top and use it to sort of create a border. Now I have a little each of these colours still left over, so I'm just going to saturate my background with colour and add these on. Then let them blend in there together. Now I don't want it to be a complete mess, so I'm just going to suck a little bit of the water away from the corners. Just enough so I get a beautiful background. Now before this is completely 100% dry, I'm going to add a little bit of white just to the top of the snowdrifts. I'm just going to use the lid here to do it. So I've just got a little bit of the white paint. I'm just going to add it along the top here, just to soften the colours. And then while that's still wet, I'm just going to grab my brush, just because I don't want any water lines, that's all. So I'm not trying to change the colour underneath, just trying to avoid watermarks. Now because that is white, it's quite possible that might do a little bit of shifting of the colours, just so it looks like a little bit of starlight glinting off the top of the snowdrifts. Well, that's my hope anyway. Alright, so the white paint didn't give quite the snowy effect I was after, so I'm just going to add some Sharpie marker and dilute it with the water brush. Now the only trick here is to be nice and quick so that the Sharpie doesn't dry on you. And all you really need to do is draw a line of paint, and then using the water brush, just blend that out slightly, which is what I might need to do. But as you can see on camera, that's just added a little bit of extra white and lightness to the top there. The beautiful background is now dry. And there's an odd little mark here. I'm assuming it's something to do with the masking ink, but that's actually going to work really nicely on my background. I have no idea why this sort of happened, and it happened when I was painting the snow, so it was there before I did my night sky. So now what I'm going to do is remove the masking fluid from this top section here. Now next I have a Stampscapes stamp, and I'm going to use this to add some little trees to my background. But to do that, I'm going to need to mask off this snowy area. Now the next step is I'm going to add some beautiful stamped trees using my watercolor paints as ink. Now the effect will be quite blurry and imprecise, which is exactly what I'm after. So I've mixed up my watercolors so that the mixture I have is quite syrupy. So I added the water and I've let it sit there for a while. And now all I'm going to do is add this to my stamp. And then stamp this onto my background. And you get the most gorgeous hint of watercolory trees. Now you can layer this and add a few more of these if you'd like to have sort of a more layered look to your background and more trees. So now I'm going to do the other side using the same method. So I'm just grabbing this syrupy watercolor paint mixture and just tapping this onto my stamp. and you've got this beautiful little hint of trees. Now I'm just going to add the tiniest bit more with a second layer, and then I'll be done. Now for the next step, you're going to need some Liquitex light modelling paste and a stencil and something to spread the paste with. So all you really need to do is grab a little paste on the brush and squeeze it through the stencil, and then carefully remove the stencil. And you'll have this gorgeous, subtle 3D, as you can see it's nice and raised, Merry Christmas. So I'm going to leave it like this for the moment and add a few spots of white and then see if it needs to be foiled or not. Because as you can see, depending on the angle, it stands out quite well, or alternatively is quite subtle, but either way it's really pretty. Now to add my white spots, I don't want them on the snow, so I'm just going to put my little mask back over, and I've got a white Sharpie marker, and all I'm going to do here is prime the Sharpie marker so that there's some paint on the tip, and all I'm going to do is whack it on this pencil, and yes, I know that that's not very technical, to get something, little paint splatters that look a bit like stars. Now you'll need to keep priming this to get paint continually on the surface of the pen, and the darker your background, the more that paint will stand out. Now the other thing you can do is add a few tiny little highlights as sort of bits of glimmer on the tree branches, just to help pick out some of the tree shape. Now when I get that a little bit closer, you can see all those beautiful little white speckles and the little bits on the trees. Now if you'd like any of these to be more prominent, just touch the tip of the Sharpie marker to some of these beautiful little spots, and it will just help enhance the look. And now I'm going to do the same thing with some of the beautiful white from the Gansai Tambi Watercolor set. So just open it up, add a little water, and then let it sit for a minute or two until that has soaked into the watercolor pan a bit and softened it up. You don't want it to be too liquidy, but this will be beautiful. Now, while that's softening, I'm just going to pop the little template, the little stencil, back over my lettuce here. Make sure that it's sitting really well. And then I'm going to add some adhesive size to this, which will make the top of the letters sticky. Now I happen to have the gold size from Express It, but the Speedball metal leaf adhesive size is also good, and both of those would work really well. And all I have to do is dip the brush in here. Actually, I might not even need the template. I'll just be very careful. And I'm just going to paint this on top of the letters. Now it's really important to only add the tiniest bit, so please excuse me while I go and do that very, very carefully. Now while I have the size out, there's one little thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to paint a bit of it onto the top of the snowdrifts. And it will also allow me to add a little bit of a hint of glitter on the top of these little snowdrifts. Win-win for me. So just don't paint it too generously, especially as you get towards the lettering. And of course remember to wash that brush out straight away. Now I still need to leave that frisket to dry, but in the meantime I'm just going to lay this over the top and add that beautiful pearly paint. So I've left this for a little while and it's now nice and syrupy. And again, what I'm going to do is just tap this over the surface. And you don't want to add too much, so I'm just going to leave it there and leave all of this to dry. Alright, so I've just got some Crafty Sparkles glitter and I've added it very, very carefully over the adhesive size on the bottom, and I'm just going to add some silver foil over those letters before I tip this off, because I don't want any of that glitter sticking to the letters. So I've just got some beautiful silver leaf, and I'm just going to grab a little bit of this. I'm just going to press this firmly onto the adhesive size on the letters, and then I'll brush off the excess. Now, if you can, try and avoid touching the foil with your fingers, because the oil from your fingers can make it stick. And I don't know about you, but this stuff really hates me. And you can also pick off the excess and use that later, so I don't waste any if I can. Now what you'll need to do is get a good stiff brush and brush this off, and also tip the glitter off. Okay, so now we've just got a beautifully glittered top to each of the snowdrifts, and it's time to get that stiff brush. I'm just going to brush the excess off. Now I like to do this from every angle, just to catch all of the little stray pieces of glitter, or in this case foil. It gives you a really crisp, pretty result. Now, if you've got any little bits like on the M here that aren't quite perfect, I just scrape that off with tweezers. Now after doing this, you may find that you've missed little areas like on the C here, so I can always try adding a little bit of foil onto that, and I can always go over and do a second coat if I need to. So all that's left to do now is distress the edges and mount this onto some backing card. So to finish off, I have mounted on a layer of white, then silver and dark blue, and then on my white base card. And it's really important to make sure that the layers of white match, otherwise it could look really strange. I've added a little bit of foam tape underneath that main panel just to raise it off the background, and when you're looking at it, that gives it a nice little raised element, and depending on the angle, a nice little shadow line, so it looks a little bit fancier. Now it's a reasonably simple card, but it looks really soft and elegant. So with just a few simple elements, you can get a really pretty, shimmery, stylish Christmas card. So I hope you all have a wonderful festive season, and I'll be back soon with another project.